A family ring changes everything when Jungkook places it in Jimin's hand, revealing a hidden secret that shocks everyone forever. "Don't open it," the elderly man's trembling voice cracked through the silent hall just as Jungkook pressed the ancient family ring into Jimin's palm. The room froze. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the long mahogany table, their golden reflections dancing across anxious faces, while the scent of burning candles mixed with the fragrance of fresh roses that lined the grand ballroom. No one dared to breathe. The ring felt strangely warm against Jimin's skin, almost as though it possessed a heartbeat of its own. Jungkook's fingers lingered for one brief moment before letting go, his dark eyes filled not with hesitation but with quiet determination. "It belongs to you now," he whispered. Those simple words struck everyone harder than thunder. Gasps echoed from every corner of the room. Several members of the prestigious Jun family stood abruptly from their seats, disbelief written across their faces. The family ring had never been given outside the direct bloodline. For nearly 3 centuries it had passed only from one heir to another, carrying not only wealth but authority over generations of carefully guarded secrets. Yet Jungkook had just broken the oldest tradition of all. Lady Heejin, the stern family matriarch, gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. "Have you lost your mind?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Jungkook met her furious gaze without blinking. "Perfectly." His calm answer only deepened the silence. Jimin looked down at the ring resting in his hand. Crafted from white gold that had dulled with age, it held a deep crimson gemstone unlike any ruby he had ever seen. Tiny silver vines curled around the stone, engraved with symbols that seemed almost alive beneath the candlelight. As he traced one of the strange markings with his thumb, an unfamiliar warmth rushed through his arm. A distant whisper brushed against his ears. At first he thought it was someone speaking behind him, but every guest remained perfectly still. The whisper returned, softer now, impossible to understand, as if carried from another lifetime. Jimin quickly closed his fingers around the ring, hoping the sensation would disappear. It didn't. Instead, vivid images flashed through his mind. A young man standing beneath a rain-soaked oak tree, a woman crying while holding the very same ring, a burning mansion swallowed by crimson flames, then another face emerged from the fire looking directly at him with sorrowful eyes before vanishing into darkness. Jimin staggered backward. Jungkook immediately caught him before he could fall. "Easy," Jungkook murmured quietly. "It's beginning sooner than I expected." Jimin stared at him in confusion. What is happening to me?" Before Jungkook could answer, the massive wooden doors burst open with a deafening crash. Cold wind swept through the ballroom, extinguishing half the candles in an instant. The orchestra stopped playing. Every head turned toward the entrance where an elderly priest dressed in weathered black robes stood breathing heavily, rain dripping from his silver hair onto the marble floor. His frightened eyes locked onto the ring in Jimin's hand. "It has awakened," he whispered. Terror spread across his weathered face. "After all these years, it has finally chosen again." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. Some guests crossed themselves while others stepped farther away from Jimin as though he had suddenly become dangerous. The priest slowly approached, his footsteps echoing through the enormous chamber. "Young man," he said gently to Jimin, "have you begun hearing the voices?" Jimin hesitated before nodding. "Only whispers." The priest closed his eyes in despair. "Soon they will become names, then memories. Eventually they will become your own." Jungkook inhaled deeply but showed no surprise. He had expected this moment. Years earlier, hidden among dusty shelves in the family's abandoned library, he had discovered journals written by his great-grandfather. Every page described the ring's mysterious history. It was never merely an heirloom. According to forgotten records, the gemstone had been carved from a rare crystal discovered beneath the ruins of an ancient sanctuary centuries before the Jun family even existed. Legends claimed the stone remembered every soul who had ever protected it. Those memories remained asleep until the ring recognized someone capable of carrying its burden. The journals never explained how the ring chose its guardian. They only warned that once chosen, destiny could never be reversed. Jungkook had spent years searching for answers in secret. He never imagined the ring would reject every member of his own family and respond only to Jimin the moment their hands touched. Jimin looked around the hall, overwhelmed by frightened faces and endless unanswered questions. He had never cared about fortunes, family titles, or ancient traditions. He had accepted Jungkook's invitation to the gathering simply because they had become close friends over the past several years. Jungkook had always admired Jimin's quiet compassion, his habit of helping strangers without expecting gratitude, and the gentle smile that somehow remained even after difficult days. Those ordinary qualities had slowly become extraordinary in Jungkook's eyes. Yet there was one truth Jungkook had never confessed. Since the day they first met, every elderly guardian of the Jun estate had stared at Jimin with strange expressions, as though recognizing someone long forgotten. Jungkook dismissed it as coincidence until the family archives revealed an old charcoal portrait from almost 200 years ago. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The man in the portrait possessed Jimin's unmistakable eyes, the same gentle smile, and even the small scar near his left eyebrow. Only the name beneath the portrait differed. It read, Adrian Valen, first guardian of the Crimson Ring. Jungkook never showed the portrait to anyone. Instead, he quietly investigated Adrian's disappearance. Every record ended on the same mysterious sentence. The guardian vanished before revealing the final promise. Standing inside the grand ballroom now, watching the crimson gemstone glow faintly within Jimin's hand, Jungkook realized the forgotten promise might finally be returning after centuries of silence. Neither wealth nor inheritance had ever been the ring's true purpose. Its greatest secret had remained hidden beneath generations of lies, waiting patiently for the moment the right hands would hold it once more. The glow inside the crimson gemstone slowly faded, but the strange warmth refused to leave Jimin's hand. It spread through his fingers like liquid fire before settling deep inside his chest, where his heartbeat became unnaturally steady. The frightened whispers filling the ballroom gradually disappeared as every pair of eyes remained fixed on him. Even the rain pounding against the towering stained glass windows seemed quieter, as though the storm itself had paused to witness what had just begun. Jimin swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe normally. I don't understand any of this. You weren't supposed to, Jungkook answered softly. His voice carried an unfamiliar weight, one Jimin had never heard before. It was no longer the confident voice of the man who laughed too loudly during late-night drives or insisted on buying coffee for strangers. This was the voice of someone who had carried a burden alone for far too long. Lady Heejin stepped forward, the silver cane striking the marble floor with sharp authority. Give me the ring. Jimin instinctively tightened his grip. I can't. You can. No, Jimin replied, surprising even himself. Something tells me I shouldn't. For a brief moment, confusion crossed Lady Heejin's face. Then it transformed into something much darker. So it has already accepted him. Several elderly relatives exchanged nervous glances. None of them argued. The priest slowly nodded. The bond has formed. Silence returned. Jungkook walked beside Jimin, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. No one can take it from you now. Lady Heejin looked directly at Jungkook. You knew. I suspected. You gambled with centuries of our family's future. I gave the ring to the only person it wanted. The ring doesn't choose. It just did. Neither of them raised their voices, yet every sentence landed like another crack in the foundation of the Jun family's carefully guarded traditions. Jimin looked from one face to another. Someone needs to explain. The old priest removed a weathered leather journal from beneath his robe. Its cracked cover bore the same silver symbol engraved around the gemstone. This journal belonged to the first keeper after the sanctuary fell. He carefully placed it on the table. The truth has been hidden because every generation feared repeating history. Jungkook opened the fragile pages. Ancient handwriting covered every sheet. Some pages were stained with water, others with something much darker. Near the center of the journal rested a folded sketch. Jimin unfolded it carefully. His breath caught. The drawing depicted the exact ballroom where they stood. The same chandeliers. The same marble pillars. Even the same enormous staircase. Only one detail differed. In the center stood a young man wearing clothing from another century. On his right hand rested the crimson ring. His face was unmistakable. It was Jimin, or someone who looked exactly like him. The date beneath the drawing was written in fading ink. Asterisk 1824. Jimin stared at the portrait for several long seconds. This isn't possible. No, whispered the priest. It shouldn't be. Jungkook watched Jimin's expression carefully. There were dozens of portraits in the archives. You saw them. I've seen every one. And they all resemble you. Jimin slowly looked up. Who was he? The priest answered without hesitation. His name was Adrian. The first guardian. Not the first. The last. Confusion spread across Jimin's face. The last. The last guardian before the ring disappeared. Lightning flashed outside. Thunder rolled across the valley. The ballroom briefly illuminated with brilliant white light before darkness settled once again. The priest continued. History remembers heroes. He paused. But families rewrite history to protect themselves. He turned another page. The Jun family did not create the ring. They stole it. A collective gasp echoed throughout the room. Several relatives immediately protested. That's impossible. Our ancestors protected it. They built everything we have. The priest slowly shook his head. They built everything upon a lie. His tired eyes drifted toward the enormous family portrait hanging above the fireplace. It began 200 years ago. He pointed toward the oldest figure in the painting. Chairman Elias Jun. He discovered an ancient sanctuary hidden beneath Blackstone Mountain. He wasn't searching for treasure. He was searching for power. The old man's voice became almost mournful. When the sanctuary refused to surrender its greatest relic, blood was spilled. No one spoke. The guardians protected the ring with their lives. The Jun ancestors believed whoever possessed it would control unimaginable influence. But they misunderstood. The ring never granted power. It granted responsibility. Jimin felt the gemstone pulse once beneath his fingers. A whisper returned. This time it was clearer. I forgive. He froze. The voice sounded heartbreakingly familiar, as though someone had spoken beside him. He turned. No one stood there. Only the scent of fresh roses drifted through the silent ballroom. Another whisper followed. Find me. Jimin closed his eyes. Suddenly, the marble floor disappeared beneath him. He stood somewhere else. An endless rose garden stretched beneath a crimson sunset. Thousands of flowers swayed gently despite the absence of wind. Far ahead, someone stood with their back turned. The figure wore a long black coat. Dark hair moved softly across familiar shoulders. Without thinking, Jimin walked forward. Each step made the roses bloom brighter. When only a few feet remained between them, the stranger finally spoke. You came back. The voice was calm. Warm, achingly familiar. The figure slowly turned. Jimin's entire body froze. He wasn't looking at a stranger. He was looking at himself. The same eyes. The same face. Only older. Wiser. Carrying centuries of sorrow behind a faint smile. The older man raised his hand. The identical crimson ring rested upon his finger. You have inherited more than a name. His gentle smile faded. You have inherited every promise I couldn't keep. The rose garden dissolved into countless crimson petals that scattered into darkness. Jimin opened his eyes with a sudden gasp. He was back inside the ballroom. His knees nearly gave out. Jungkook caught him before he could collapse. What happened? Jimin looked at him, still trembling. I saw him. Jungkook's expression immediately changed. Who? The man from the portrait. The guardian. The room became silent once again. Jimin slowly lifted his hand. The gemstone no longer reflected the candlelight. It shone from within, like a tiny crimson heartbeat awakening after 2 centuries of waiting. The crimson light pulsed once more, brighter than before, painting the ballroom walls in a faint scarlet glow that seemed to breathe with Jimin's heartbeat. Every candle flickered violently. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the polished marble floor, twisting into shapes that resembled towering trees and forgotten ruins before melting back into ordinary darkness. No one moved. Even the servants standing near the doors lowered their eyes, unable to explain the overwhelming feeling pressing against their chests. Jimin slowly unclenched his trembling fingers. The ring no longer felt like cold metal. It felt alive. A quiet rhythm echoed through his palm. One beat, another, then silence. The elderly priest inhaled sharply. It recognizes his memories. Lady Heejin looked at him with disbelief. That has never happened. It has, the priest replied softly. Only once. He turned another brittle page of the ancient journal. The paper threatened to crumble beneath his careful hands. The guardian never carried memories alone. Jimin frowned. What does that mean? It means memories choose when they wish to be remembered. Jungkook stepped closer. So the visions are real. They are fragments. Fragments of whose life? The priest's tired eyes settled on Jimin. Perhaps yours. The answer settled over the room like winter frost. Jimin shook his head. No, it isn't possible. I've never been here before tonight. You've never seen that garden. You've never met the man. I know. But why did he look exactly like me? The priest remained silent for several seconds. Because some promises survive longer than the people who make them. Outside, rain continued striking the enormous windows. Inside, another strange sensation spread through the room. The fragrance of roses became stronger. Much stronger. Fresh. Sweet. Impossible. There were only a handful of roses decorating the ballroom, yet now the entire hall smelled as though thousands had suddenly bloomed nearby. Several guests noticed it at once. Do you smell that? The roses. They're everywhere. A young servant hurried toward one of the windows before stopping abruptly. His face lost all color. There are flowers outside. Everyone turned. The rain-soaked gardens surrounding the estate had transformed. Rows upon rows of crimson roses now covered the grounds. They stretched beyond the fountain, beyond the ancient oak trees, beyond the stone walls surrounding the estate. An endless sea of scarlet blossoms shimmered beneath the falling rain. Lady Heejin whispered almost inaudibly. It has returned. Jimin stared through the glass. I don't understand. Jungkook did. Or at least he remembered reading something remarkably similar years earlier. He hurried toward one of the dusty display cabinets lining the western wall of the ballroom. Hidden behind several framed certificates, rested an old landscape painting almost forgotten by everyone. He lifted it carefully. The canvas depicted the Jun estate exactly as it had appeared 2 centuries earlier. Except, the mansion stood surrounded by countless crimson roses. Exactly like the view outside. At the bottom of the painting, someone had written a sentence in faded ink. When the guardian returns, the sleeping garden shall remember. Jungkook slowly lowered the painting. So it wasn't a legend. The priest nodded. No, it was history. Jimin felt another sharp pulse inside the ring. This time the vision arrived without warning. The ballroom vanished. He stood inside an enormous stone sanctuary, illuminated by hundreds of candles. Ancient pillars disappeared into darkness above. The air smelled of rain and burning cedar. Footsteps echoed behind him. He turned. A young woman wearing a white cloak approached with tears in her eyes. She could not have been older than 25. Her hands trembled as she reached toward him. Promise me. Her voice cracked. No matter what happens. You will never let them divide the ring from its promise. Jimin stared at her. Zai. The words refused to come. She smiled sadly. I know. And you always struggle to say goodbye. Before he could ask who she was, distant shouting erupted throughout the sanctuary. Steel clashed against steel. People screamed. The woman's expression changed instantly. They're here. She removed the crimson ring from his finger. No. Jimin reached toward her instinctively. She shook her head. If they find it, they'll destroy everything. Footsteps thundered through the corridor. The woman suddenly pressed the ring back into his hand. Listen carefully. This is the last time. The promise was never about protecting the ring. It was about protecting the one who would inherit it. She gently touched his face. When you meet him. A faint smile appeared despite the fear in her eyes. Trust your heart before your memories. The sanctuary doors exploded inward. Armed men flooded inside. The woman shoved Jimin backward. Run. Everything shattered into darkness. Jimin gasped violently as the vision ended. He found himself kneeling on the ballroom floor. Jungkook was beside him. Jimin. His voice sounded distant. Almost muffled. Jimin blinked several times before focusing. There was a woman. What woman? I don't know her. But she knew me. His breathing remained uneven. She told me the promise wasn't about the ring. The priest immediately stepped forward. What exactly did she say? Jimin closed his eyes, recalling every word. She said. He looked directly at Jungkook. The promise was about protecting the one who would inherit it. Silence swallowed the ballroom. Jungkook felt something tighten inside his chest. A memory surfaced. Years ago, his grandfather had spoken a single sentence moments before his death. At the time it had made no sense. Now every word returned with perfect clarity. The ring will never protect our family. It will protect the one our family has been waiting for. Jungkook had spent years believing those words referred to the next heir. Only now did he realize they had never been about the Jun bloodline at all. His eyes slowly met Jimin's. For the first time since placing the family ring into Jimin's hand, Jungkook understood that he had not given away his family's greatest inheritance. He had returned it to the person for whom it had always been destined. A heavy silence settled over the ballroom after Jungkook's realization. No one challenged him. No one even attempted to deny the possibility anymore. The crimson roses outside continued to sway beneath the rain, although no wind touched them. Their petals shimmered beneath flashes of lightning, transforming the estate into a sea of scarlet that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. Jimin slowly rose to his feet, his breathing finally steady. The strange pressure inside his chest remained, but the fear that had accompanied the first visions had begun to change into something else. It was not understanding, not yet, but familiarity. Every heartbeat seemed to draw him closer to memories that belonged to another lifetime. I know this place, he whispered. Jungkook turned toward him. What did you say? I've never been here before, but it doesn't feel unfamiliar anymore. His eyes wandered across the ballroom. The towering fireplace. The carved oak staircase. The stained glass ceiling. Even the faint crack running across one marble pillar. I know where everything is. Without waiting for anyone, Jimin walked across the hall. Several relatives stepped aside instinctively. He reached the massive fireplace and rested his fingertips against the cold stone. His eyes closed. Another whisper echoed inside his mind. Left. Almost unconsciously, he pushed against one particular carving shaped like an ivy leaf. A deep rumble vibrated beneath the floor. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. The fireplace slowly shifted backward. Ancient gears groaned after centuries of silence. Behind the moving wall appeared a narrow stone passage descending into darkness. Lady Heejin staggered backward. No, the priest crossed himself. It still exists. Jungkook stared at the hidden entrance in disbelief. The secret passage. My grandfather searched for it his entire life. He never found it. Jimin looked equally astonished. I didn't know it was there. But you found it, Jungkook replied quietly. I don't know how. You remembered. The scent of damp earth drifted upward from the hidden staircase. The air carried a faint fragrance of old parchment, cedar wood and roses. Without speaking, Jimin stepped toward the entrance. Jungkook immediately walked beside him. "I'm coming with you." The priest picked up a lantern resting near the fireplace. "So am I." Lady Heejun hesitated. For decades she had protected every secret the family possessed. Some were preserved out of duty, others out of fear. If the passage truly led where she believed it did, the truth buried beneath generations of silence could never be hidden again. She tightened her grip on her cane. "I'll go." One by one, the remaining relatives stayed behind. No one wished to descend. Some whispered prayers. Others refused even to look toward the opening. Only 4 figures stepped into the ancient passage. Jimin first, Jungkook beside him, the priest carrying the lantern, Lady Heejun following several steps behind. The hidden door slowly closed after them with a thunderous echo. Darkness swallowed the ballroom. The narrow corridor descended deep beneath the estate. Water dripped steadily from the stone ceiling. Their footsteps echoed endlessly along the worn staircase. The deeper they traveled, the colder the air became. Ancient symbols covered the walls. The same silver markings engraved around the crimson gemstone. Jimin instinctively traced one symbol with his fingertips. The stone immediately began glowing. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire corridor illuminated with soft crimson light. The lantern became unnecessary. The priest stared in amazement. "They're responding to him." Lady Heejun remained silent. Her expression had become unreadable. She had spent nearly 80 years believing the stories were exaggerated myths created to preserve the family's authority. Now every legend unfolded before her eyes. After what felt like several minutes, the staircase opened into a vast underground chamber. Everyone stopped. The room was magnificent. Towering pillars carved from black stone supported a domed ceiling painted with faded constellations. Thousands of tiny crystals embedded in the rock reflected the crimson glow until the chamber resembled a sky filled with frozen stars. At its center stood a circular platform. Upon it rested a single white marble pedestal. Nothing else. No treasure. No crowns. No weapons. Only an empty pedestal. Jimin slowly approached. The closer he came, the louder the heartbeat inside the ring became. Thump, thump, thump. When he stood before the pedestal, the gemstone suddenly shone brilliantly. A beam of crimson light rose toward the ceiling. The chamber trembled. Ancient mechanisms hidden beneath the floor awakened. Massive stone panels surrounding the room slid open one after another. Inside each alcove stood life-sized marble statues. Dozens of them. Men, women, young, old. Each wore identical robes. Each extended one hand toward the empty pedestal. Each bore the same peaceful expression. The priest's voice trembled. The guardians. Jungkook counted silently. There were 24 statues. 24 faces. 24 generations. Jimin walked slowly among them. Each statue felt strangely familiar. He stopped before the final one. Unlike the others, its face had never been completed. Only rough outlines remained, as though the sculptor had abandoned the work before carving its features. At the base of the unfinished statue, a sentence had been engraved. "The last guardian shall finish what the first began." Jimin stared at the inscription. The last guardian. He turned toward the priest. "I thought Adrian was the last." The old man lowered his eyes. So did everyone. A deep cracking sound interrupted him. The marble pedestal at the center of the chamber began to split apart. Dust filled the air. Slowly, a hidden compartment emerged from within the stone. Inside rested a small wooden chest wrapped in silver chains. Unlike everything else in the chamber, the chest looked untouched by time. Its polished surface gleamed as though it had been crafted only yesterday. No lock secured it. Only a single engraving decorated the lid. A blooming rose encircling the same crimson gemstone. Jimin reached toward it. Lady Heejin suddenly spoke. Wait. Her voice was quieter than before. More fragile. There is something I never told anyone. Everyone looked at her. She slowly removed an old key hanging beneath her necklace. It was made of tarnished silver. The bow of the key formed the shape of a rose. My grandmother gave me this on the night she died. Her hands trembled. She said there would come a day when someone who wasn't born into our family would return for what was never ours. She looked directly at Jimin. I spent my whole life praying she was wrong. With tears quietly gathering in her eyes, she placed the ancient key into Jimin's free hand. It seems she wasn't. The ancient silver key felt unexpectedly warm in Jimin's hand, its delicate rose-shaped bow fitting perfectly between his fingers, as though it had been crafted specifically for him centuries ago. The moment his skin touched the worn metal, a gentle vibration traveled through the underground chamber. Dust drifted from the vaulted ceiling. The crystals embedded within the black stone walls shimmered softly, casting thousands of tiny crimson reflections that danced across the statues of the guardians. No one spoke. Even the steady dripping of water, somewhere deep within the sanctuary, seemed to fade. Lady Heejin stared at the key resting in Jimin's palm, her proud posture finally giving way to exhaustion. I guarded it for 58 years, she whispered. I was taught that if the wrong person ever held both the key and the ring, our family would lose everything. The priest slowly shook his head. No. His voice echoed gently through the chamber. You were taught the story the way fear wanted you to remember it. Lady Heejin looked at him. The original prophecy never said your family would lose everything. She frowned. What did it say? The priest closed the weathered journal before answering. It said they would finally stop carrying what never belonged to them. The words struck her harder than any accusation. Her shoulders slowly slumped. For the first time in decades, she felt not anger but relief. Jungkook quietly watched the exchange. He had grown up believing that inheritance meant ownership. Tonight he was learning that true inheritance sometimes meant knowing when to let go. Jimin stepped toward the marble pedestal. The wooden chest rested inside the ancient compartment, wrapped tightly in silver chains engraved with the same mysterious symbols covering the sanctuary walls. There was no visible keyhole. Only a single rose carved into the center of the lid. Jimin looked at the silver key. This doesn't fit. The priest smiled faintly. It was never meant to unlock a lock. Jimin hesitated. Then what does it unlock? Trust. He looked puzzled. The priest pointed toward the carved rose. Place the key there. Jimin carefully laid the silver key across the engraved flower. The instant the metal touched the carving, the symbols along the chains ignited with crimson light. A soft metallic melody echoed through the chamber. Not the harsh sound of breaking chains. Rather, the graceful harmony of dozens of tiny locks releasing together. One by one, the silver chains loosened. They gently slid from the chest and settled onto the stone floor without a single link breaking. The lid slowly lifted on its own. A warm breeze escaped from inside. It carried the unmistakable fragrance of fresh roses, mixed with cedar and rain. Everyone leaned forward. The chest contained no jewels. No gold. No ancient weapon. Only 3 objects rested upon dark velvet. A faded leather journal. A sealed envelope tied with a crimson ribbon. And a single pressed white rose that looked impossibly untouched by time. Jimin reached for the journal first. Its cover bore only 2 words. For you. His heartbeat quickened. He slowly opened the first page. The handwriting was elegant. Steady. Painfully familiar. If these words have reached you, then time has finally kept its promise. Jimin froze. The handwriting. He had seen it before. In the vision. On the sanctuary walls, beneath the portrait, Adrian. His hands trembled as he continued reading. You may believe you are reading another man's memories. You are wrong. You are reading the future I once hoped would exist. Jungkook noticed the color draining from Jimin's face. What is it? Jimin silently handed him the journal. Jungkook read the opening lines. His eyes widened. This. He looked at the priest. How could someone write to a person living 2 centuries later? The priest answered quietly. Perhaps he wasn't writing to the future. What do you mean? Perhaps he believed promises could outlive time. Jimin turned another page. A detailed drawing filled the parchment. It showed 2 young men standing beneath an enormous oak tree, overlooking a cliff covered with blooming roses. One wore the crimson ring. The other smiled while holding a lantern. Neither face was fully detailed. Only their silhouettes appeared. Beneath the sketch, Adrian had written another sentence. One will carry the promise. The other will remind him why it matters. Jimin looked up. His eyes instinctively found Jungkook. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. Somehow the illustration felt hauntingly familiar. As if it had always been waiting for them. Jimin carefully set the journal aside. His attention shifted toward the sealed envelope. Unlike the journal, its wax seal remained perfectly intact. The symbol impressed into the crimson wax was not a rose. It was a pair of intertwined hands. On the front, someone had written another message. Open only when your heart no longer fears the truth. Jimin gently brushed his thumb across the seal but did not break it. I don't think I'm ready. No one ever is, the priest replied. Finally, Jimin lifted the pressed white rose. Its petals were soft despite the passing centuries. As soon as he touched it, another vision unfolded. He stood once again inside the sanctuary. Only this time it was alive. Hundreds of candles illuminated the chamber. Voices echoed through the halls. People hurried in every direction. The young woman from before smiled as she arranged fresh white roses around the pedestal. Adrian stood nearby. He looked older than before. Tired. His coat was torn. A bandage wrapped around one shoulder. Yet his eyes softened the moment another man entered the sanctuary. The newcomer carried a lantern. He laughed quietly after noticing Adrian surrounded by flowers. You've been awake all night again. Adrian smiled. I wanted everything to be perfect. For what? For the promise. The other man stepped closer. You've protected this place your entire life. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. Adrian looked at the crimson ring. I made one promise I still haven't kept. The lantern bearer reached into his pocket. He produced a simple silver pendant shaped like a rose. Then keep it. Adrian accepted it with grateful eyes. I was afraid. Of what? That history would remember the ring. He glanced toward the countless white roses. And forget the people who gave it meaning. The lantern bearer rested a reassuring hand on Adrian's shoulder. Then we'll make sure it remembers both. The vision slowly dissolved. Jimin opened his eyes. His cheeks were unexpectedly wet. He had not realized he was crying. Jungkook stepped closer. What did you see? Jimin struggled to answer. I don't know who they were. He looked down at the pressed, white rose still resting in his hand. But they weren't fighting for power. His voice became almost a whisper. They were fighting to protect hope. The underground sanctuary fell silent once more. For the first time in 2 centuries, the chamber no longer felt like a forgotten tomb buried beneath layers of secrets. It felt like a place that had been patiently waiting for someone to remember why it had been built in the first place. The sanctuary remained wrapped in profound silence, yet it was no longer the oppressive silence of forgotten ruins. It felt almost welcoming, as if the chamber itself had exhaled after centuries of waiting. The crimson light reflecting from the ring softened into a warm glow that washed gently over the marble statues. Their carved faces, once solemn and distant, now seemed peaceful. Jimin carefully placed the pressed white rose back inside the wooden chest. His fingertips lingered on the fragile petals before he slowly closed his hand. The emotions left behind by the vision still lingered inside him. They did not feel borrowed anymore. They felt strangely personal. Jungkook watched him closely. "You've changed." Jimin looked up. "I have." "You look like someone who's remembering home." The words lingered in the cool air. Jimin searched for an answer but found none. "I don't understand any of this," he admitted quietly. "Every vision feels like a memory, yet every memory belongs to someone else." The priest approached one of the marble pillars and brushed away a thick layer of dust. "It may not be someone else." Jimin frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man pointed toward an inscription carved into the stone. Unlike the other symbols, these words were written in an older language, their letters flowing like intertwined vines. The guardians believed that promises carried enough love could survive beyond a single lifetime. Lady Heejin slowly approached. "I always thought that was poetry." "So did most people." The priest smiled faintly. "Until tonight." Jungkook walked beside Jimin. "Do you remember anything else?" Jimin hesitated. "Only feelings." "What kind of feelings?" He looked around the sanctuary. "Responsibility." He turned toward the statues. "Grief." His gaze settled on the wooden chest. "And hope." The priest nodded. "Those are often the first memories to return." Jimin suddenly noticed something he had overlooked. Each guardian statue wore a pendant around its neck. Every pendant was shaped differently. A feather, a star, a tree, a wave, but the unfinished statue at the end of the chamber wore nothing. Its neck remained bare. Jimin slowly walked toward it. "There should be something here." The priest's expression changed. "You noticed?" Lady Heejin looked confused. "What are you talking about?" The final guardian always receives a symbol. But this statue was never completed. Jimin touched the unfinished stone. The ring became warm again. Almost instantly, another low rumble echoed beneath the sanctuary floor. A narrow section of the wall beside the statue slid open. Inside rested a velvet-covered pedestal. Upon it lay a single silver pendant shaped like a blooming rose. Its design matched the engraving on the ancient key. Jungkook stared in astonishment. "It was hidden." The priest nodded. "For the one who would finish the story." Jimin reached toward the pendant. The instant his fingers closed around it, an overwhelming warmth rushed through him. This vision was stronger than the others. Far stronger. The sanctuary disappeared. He stood atop a grassy cliff, overlooking an endless ocean beneath a golden sunset. Thousands of roses covered the hillside. Their petals danced in the gentle sea breeze. The sound of waves crashing against the cliffs filled the air. Someone was standing beside him. Adrian. For the first time, his face appeared perfectly clear. He looked exactly like Jimin. Not merely similar. Identical. Only his clothing belonged to another century. He smiled softly. "I wondered how long it would take." Jimin stared at him. "Who are you?" "I've been called many names." "Adrian." He nodded. "Yes. Are you?" "My past. My future. My imagination." Adrian laughed quietly. "I'm simply the promise that refused to disappear." Jimin looked down at the ring. "Why me?" "Because you never truly forgot." "I've never been here." "Haven't you?" Adrian gestured toward the ocean. "Close your eyes." Jimin obeyed. The scent of roses grew stronger. The sound of waves became clearer. Then, laughter. Children running across the hillside. A woman singing somewhere nearby. A warm hand gently resting on his shoulder. Tears welled in Jimin's eyes before he understood why. I know this place. Adrian smiled. You planted those roses. I did. One by one. Every spring. Jimin opened his eyes. I still don't remember. You will. Adrian's expression slowly became more serious. But memories are not why you're here. Then why am I here? Adrian looked toward the horizon where sunlight touched the sea. Because history repeated one mistake. What mistake? It turned the ring into an inheritance. His eyes returned to Jimin. It was never meant to belong to a family. It belongs to everyone willing to protect kindness when fear becomes easier. Jimin listened in silence. The ring has no power. Oh, it has power. What kind? It reminds people who they truly are. Jimin looked confused. That doesn't sound extraordinary. Adrian smiled. It is the rarest miracle of all. A peaceful silence settled between them. Finally, Jimin asked the question that had quietly haunted him since the first vision. Who was the man with the lantern? For the first time, Adrian looked away. His smile became softer. He was my closest friend. The one in the drawings. Yes, the one who stayed when everyone else left. Jimin hesitated. Were you protecting him? Adrian answered without hesitation. No, we protected each other. He looked directly into Jimin's eyes. Remember that. The wind carried countless rose petals into the sky. They spiraled around them like crimson snow. Adrian's figure slowly began fading into the light. Our time is ending. Wait, I still have so many questions. You'll find the answers yourself. How? Adrian gently pointed toward Jimin's heart. The memories you seek aren't hidden inside the ring. They've been waiting inside you. The vision dissolved. Jimin found himself standing once again inside the underground sanctuary. His hand instinctively rested over his chest. His heartbeat had returned to normal. Yet something inside him had changed forever. He looked down. The silver rose pendant now hung around his neck. No one had placed it there. It simply rested against his chest, as though it had always belonged there. Jungkook noticed it first. The pendant. Jimin looked down in surprise. I didn't. The priest smiled with quiet certainty. It has accepted its guardian. Lady Heejin looked at Jimin for a long moment before slowly bowing her head. Not as the matriarch of the Jun family. Not as the guardian of old traditions. But simply as one person acknowledging another. It seems, she said softly, our family's greatest duty was never to own this legacy. She lifted her eyes with a peaceful smile. It was to protect it until the day its true guardian finally came home. The words lingered in the sanctuary long after Lady Heejin fell silent. No one felt the need to answer. The air itself seemed transformed, lighter than before, as though an invisible weight carried for generations had finally been lifted from the ancient stones. Jimin instinctively touched the silver rose pendant resting against his chest. It was warm, matching the gentle pulse of the crimson ring on his finger. For the first time since Jungkook had placed the family ring into his hand, the strange sensation inside him no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like a quiet voice that had stopped shouting because it finally knew it had been heard. Jungkook stood beside him, saying nothing. Throughout the long night, he had watched Jimin change from a confused guest into someone who somehow belonged inside this forgotten sanctuary, more naturally than anyone born into the Jun family. He smiled quietly. I've never seen this place feel alive. The priest nodded. Neither have I. He slowly walked toward the center of the chamber, where the empty marble pedestal still stood beneath the crimson beam of light. There is one final tradition. Lady Heejin looked surprised. I thought they had all been forgotten. So did I. The priest carefully opened Adrian's journal once more. Near the final pages, hidden beneath folded parchment, rested another sheet of paper. Unlike the others, this page was untouched by age. Its ink remained perfectly dark. At the top, written in elegant handwriting, appeared a single sentence. The Guardian's promise. The priest looked toward Jimin. It was never spoken aloud. Why? Because promises made for recognition are easily broken. He handed the page to Jimin. It was always meant to be read in silence. Jimin lowered his eyes. The words seemed strangely familiar. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Choose compassion before power. Guard truth before tradition. Carry hope even when fear seems wiser. And when your journey ends, pass neither the ring nor the burden through blood. Pass them only to the heart that chooses kindness without being asked. A deep breath escaped Jimin. The words stirred something within him. Not a memory. A certainty. He folded the page carefully. I understand. The priest smiled. I believe you do. Jimin looked around the sanctuary once more. The statues no longer seemed like distant figures trapped in history. Each face carried quiet dignity. Each represented a life spent protecting something greater than themselves. His gaze eventually settled on the unfinished guardian, the one whose face remained uncarved. He walked toward it. Without knowing why, he gently rested his hand upon the cold marble. The ring glowed softly. The sanctuary answered. A warm vibration spread through every stone wall. Fine cracks appeared across the unfinished statue. Not from damage. From transformation. Tiny fragments of marble drifted gently to the floor like white snow. Slowly, patiently, the rough stone began reshaping itself. Every line became smoother. Eyes emerged. Features. Within moments, the unfinished guardian possessed a complete face. It was not Adrian. It was not Jimin. It was someone entirely new. A calm expression. Eyes filled with quiet determination. Neither young nor old. The priest stared in amazement. The statue. Lady Heejin stepped closer. It changed. Jungkook looked at Jimin. What does it mean? Jimin smiled faintly. It means the story isn't repeating. He gently lowered his hand. It has finally moved forward. The crimson light rising toward the ceiling slowly dissolved. One by one, the glowing symbols along the walls faded, until only the ordinary crystal reflections remained. The sanctuary no longer felt suspended between centuries. It felt peacefully at rest. The priest closed Adrian's journal. I waited my entire life hoping to witness this. And now, he smiled. Now my duty is complete. As they made their way back toward the hidden staircase, Jimin paused beside the wooden chest. Something caught his attention. Beneath the velvet lining lay one final object hidden in a narrow compartment. A small photograph. Unlike everything else inside the sanctuary, it was modern. Only a few years old. Jimin carefully picked it up. The picture showed a younger Jungkook standing beneath an enormous oak tree. He appeared to be laughing with someone standing just outside the frame. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, were a few simple words. You found him sooner than I expected. Jimin frowned. He turned toward Jungkook. Did you put this here? Jungkook's expression filled with genuine confusion. I've never seen that photograph before. The handwriting. Jimin recognized it immediately. It matched Adrian's journal perfectly. Yet that was impossible. The photograph couldn't have existed 2 centuries ago. The priest examined it closely. His eyes widened. There is another note. Hidden beneath the photograph was a folded slip of paper. Jimin unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence appeared. Time never guarded the promise. People did. A gentle smile spread across Jimin's face. For the first time, he realized the greatest secret surrounding the family ring had never been supernatural power, forgotten treasure, or an ancient prophecy. The ring had endured because generation after generation, some remembered by history, many completely forgotten, had quietly chosen compassion over possession. That choice had carried the promise across centuries. As the four of them emerged from the hidden passage into the ballroom, dawn was breaking beyond the stained glass windows. The storm had disappeared. Golden sunlight spilled across the polished marble floor. Outside, the endless field of crimson roses still surrounded the estate. But as the first rays of morning touched their petals, they slowly dissolved into countless sparkling droplets of light. Within minutes, only the original garden remained. The miracle had quietly fulfilled its purpose. Jimin stepped onto the front terrace. Fresh morning air filled his lungs. Jungkook joined him, resting his arms against the stone railing. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Jungkook broke the silence. "Do you regret accepting the ring?" Jimin looked toward the rising sun. "No," he smiled gently. "But I don't think I accepted it." Jungkook raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jimin looked down at the crimson gemstone, now glowing no brighter than an ordinary heirloom. "I think it accepted all of us." Jungkook followed his gaze. A quiet laugh escaped him. For years he had believed the family ring represented legacy. Now he understood that legacy was never measured by inheritance, wealth, or bloodline. It was measured by every act of kindness quietly passed from one heart to another, long after names had faded into history. The morning breeze carried the faint fragrance of roses across the estate one last time, and for the first time in generations, the Jun family home no longer felt like a mansion burdened by secrets. It felt like a place where an old promise had finally found peace. 3 years passed, yet not a single morning went by without Jimin touching the crimson ring before stepping outside. It had become less an object and more a quiet companion, no longer glowing with supernatural brilliance or flooding his mind with visions. Instead, it rested peacefully on his finger, warm only when someone stood at a crossroads where compassion mattered more than certainty. The Jun estate had changed just as dramatically. The heavy portraits of stern ancestors still lined the grand halls, but the mansion no longer felt imprisoned by silence. The hidden sanctuary beneath the estate had been carefully preserved, not as a secret vault, but as a memorial to every forgotten guardian whose greatest achievement had never been power, but mercy. Jungkook stood on the eastern balcony, watching the first light of dawn paint the gardens gold. The endless sea of miraculous crimson roses had never returned, yet every spring a single white rose bloomed beside the ancient oak tree overlooking the valley. No gardener planted it. No one could explain how it appeared. It simply returned each year, blooming for only 3 days before quietly fading away. Jungkook smiled as he watched Jimin kneel beside the flower, gently brushing dew from its petals. "You still visit it every morning." Jimin looked over his shoulder. "It reminds me not to forget." "Forget what?" "That promises aren't kept once." He stood and walked toward Jungkook. "They're kept every day." Jungkook nodded thoughtfully. "You sound more like Adrian every year." Jimin laughed softly. "I hope not." "Why?" "Because I'm not meant to become him." His fingers lightly touched the ring. "I'm supposed to become myself." The words lingered between them. The years had changed them both. Jungkook no longer carried the invisible burden of protecting his family's reputation. Instead, he devoted his time to restoring abandoned schools, libraries, and historic buildings that had long been neglected. The Jun Foundation, once known only for preserving wealth, had quietly become one of the country's largest supporters of education and community projects. Whenever journalists asked why the foundation had changed so dramatically, Jungkook always gave the same answer. An inheritance only matters if someone else's future becomes brighter because of it. No one knew where those words had come from. Only Jimin recognized them. They were not Adrian's. They were Jungkook's own promise. One peaceful afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the estate library, an unexpected visitor arrived. She appeared to be no older than 16. Her school uniform was soaked from the rain, and a worn canvas backpack hung from one shoulder. The servants welcomed her inside. I'm looking for Mr. Jimin. Jimin looked up from the old journal he had been carefully restoring. I'm Jimin. The girl hesitated before stepping closer. My name is Mina. She nervously reached into her backpack. I think I found something that belongs to you. She placed a small wooden box on the table. It was old. Very old. Its surface was carved with intertwining vines. At its center rested the familiar symbol of a blooming rose. Jungkook immediately recognized it. I've never seen that design before. Neither had Jimin. Yet the moment he looked at the box, an unmistakable feeling washed over him. Recognition. Not from memory. From instinct. Where did you find it? My grandfather passed away last month. She lowered her eyes. While cleaning his attic, we discovered this hidden beneath the floorboards. She swallowed nervously. There was a letter with it. She unfolded a carefully preserved sheet of paper. My grandfather wrote that if anyone wearing a crimson ring ever appeared, I should give them the box. The room became silent. Jimin accepted the letter. Its handwriting was unfamiliar. If this message reaches the Guardian, then I have kept my promise. Forgive me for hiding what I could not protect. The rose compass belongs with the ring. It will reveal the path only when another guardian is needed. Jimin slowly looked up. The rose compass. The phrase had never appeared in Adrian's journal. The priest, now retired but still living on the estate, quietly entered the library after hearing the conversation. When his eyes fell upon the wooden box, he stopped breathing for a moment. I thought it had been destroyed. You know what it is? Jungkook asked. The old priest slowly nodded. Not exactly. He approached with visible reverence. I only know the legend. What legend? The ring was never meant to travel alone. He gently touched the carved rose. It once had a companion. A compass. But not one that pointed north. Jimin frowned. Then what did it point toward? The priest smiled. It pointed toward hearts carrying the same promise. No one spoke. Jimin carefully opened the wooden box. Inside rested a beautifully crafted silver compass, unlike any ordinary instrument. Instead of directions, the circular face bore delicate engravings of roses. There were no letters, no numbers, only a single crystal needle suspended beneath clear glass. The moment Jimin lifted the compass, the needle spun wildly. Once, twice, again. Then it stopped. Not toward the north. Not toward the south. It pointed directly toward the eastern window. Beyond the rolling hills. Beyond the forests. Toward distant mountains hidden beneath gathering clouds. At the exact same moment, the crimson ring grew warm for the first time in 3 peaceful years. Jimin exchanged a quiet glance with Jungkook. Neither needed to ask the question forming between them. Somewhere beyond those mountains, another promise was waiting to be found. And the compass remained perfectly still, its silver needle unwavering as it pointed toward the distant eastern mountains. Outside the library windows, clouds gathered above the peaks, wrapping them in pale mist. The room itself felt unchanged, yet everyone inside sensed that the quiet peace of the past 3 years had come to an end. Jimin held the rose compass in one hand and the crimson ring in the other. Both radiated the same gentle warmth, not the overwhelming energy he had experienced in the sanctuary years earlier, but something calmer, more like recognition than warning. Mina watched them with uncertainty. I'm sorry, she said softly, did I bring trouble? Jimin immediately smiled. No, he shook his head. You brought an answer. The old priest slowly lowered himself into a nearby chair. I spent decades studying every record that survived. His eyes remained fixed on the compass. Yet there was one sentence I never understood. What sentence? Jungkook asked. The priest closed his eyes, recalling the ancient text from memory. When the rose remembers the horizon, the promise must travel once more. Jungkook looked toward the eastern mountains. You think that's where we're supposed to go? I don't think. The priest smiled gently. I know. The following morning, the estate awoke earlier than usual. The sky glowed with soft shades of orange, as servants quietly prepared supplies for the journey. Unlike the dramatic departure of adventurers chasing treasure, there was no excitement in the air. Only purpose. Jimin packed lightly. A notebook. Adrian's journal. A change of clothes. The rose compass. Nothing more. Jungkook entered carrying 2 travel backpacks. I knew you'd forget food. Jimin laughed. I probably would have. And blankets. True. And water. Jimin smiled wider. I'm beginning to think you planned this before I did. I've known you long enough. Their laughter echoed through the quiet hallway. Lady Heejin watched them from the staircase. She had grown noticeably older over the past 3 years, but the sternness that once defined her had softened into quiet dignity. As Jimin approached, she held out a small folded map. My grandfather drew this. Jimin carefully unfolded it. Unlike modern maps, it showed only forests, rivers, and mountain trails. One location had been circled in faded crimson ink. Rose Valley. It no longer exists on any official map, Lady Heejin explained. Why? An earthquake destroyed the village over a century ago. The priest gently corrected her. No, it disappeared. She looked at him. There is a difference. Jimin studied the map. At the edge of Rose Valley, someone had written 4 words. Where dawn meets memory. Hours later, their vehicle left the Jun estate behind. Mina stood beside Lady Heejin, waving until the road disappeared into the surrounding forest. The journey east took them through quiet villages, winding mountain roads, and endless fields where autumn flowers danced beneath the breeze. For long stretches, neither Jimin nor Jungkook spoke. The silence between them had never been uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who no longer needed words to understand one another. By late afternoon, they reached the foothills. The road ended. From there, only a narrow stone path continued into the mountains. Jimin removed the compass from his backpack. Its needle began turning again. Slowly this time. Almost thoughtfully. Then it settled along the trail. They continued on foot. The forest surrounding the mountain felt untouched by time. Towering cedar trees filtered the sunlight into ribbons of gold. Birdsong echoed high above the branches. Crystal-clear streams crossed the path at regular intervals. Hours passed. The higher they climbed, the cooler the air became. Eventually, they reached a weathered stone bridge spanning a narrow gorge. Half of it had collapsed years earlier. Only a few ancient arches remained. Jungkook examined the structure. We'll have to cross carefully. Before either of them stepped forward, an elderly voice drifted through the forest. I've been waiting. Both men turned. An old woman stood beside the bridge. Her silver hair was braided neatly beneath a wide straw hat. She leaned upon a carved wooden staff decorated with tiny silver roses. Despite her age, her eyes were remarkably clear. She smiled warmly at Jimin. You finally brought it home. Jimin instinctively looked at the ring. You know this place. She chuckled. I've lived here longer than anyone remembers. Jungkook exchanged a cautious glance with Jimin. The woman slowly approached. Her gaze shifted toward the rose compass. It still works. You know what this is? Jimin asked. I made it. Silence fell instantly. Jungkook blinked. That's impossible. She laughed quietly. So people keep telling me. Jimin studied her face. There was something strangely familiar about her smile. Not because he had seen her before. Because it reminded him of someone. The young woman from his visions. The one inside the sanctuary. The realization struck him all at once. You. The old woman nodded before he could finish. My name once was Elena. Jimin's heart skipped a beat. The woman with Adrian's. Her smile became tinged with sadness. You remember. I saw you. She gently touched one of the roses carved into her staff. I wondered whether his memories would ever return. Jungkook stared at her in disbelief. But Adrian lived 200 years ago. Elena looked toward the setting sun. So he did. Then, how are you still alive? She smiled without mystery or pride. I'm not. The mountain breeze swept gently across the bridge. I simply kept my promise longer than my years. Jimin looked at her in confusion. I don't understand. You will. She pointed beyond the bridge. Rose Valley isn't ahead. It has never been ahead. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? She gently tapped the rose compass with her staff. It doesn't guide people through mountains. It guides them through remembrance. The compass suddenly began glowing. Not crimson. Soft white. The air around the ancient bridge shimmered, gently like sunlight reflected upon water. The ruined arches slowly disappeared. In their place emerged another bridge. Whole, magnificent, covered with blooming white roses. Beyond it, where only dense forest had stood moments earlier, an entire hidden valley slowly revealed itself beneath the evening light. Stone cottages rested among flowering gardens. Crystal streams wound between ancient oak trees. Children laughed in the distance. Church bells rang softly across the hills. The valley appeared untouched by time. Jimin stood speechless. He had never seen the place before. Yet tears quietly filled his eyes. Because somewhere deep within his heart, he had finally come home. Jimin stood at the entrance to the hidden valley, unable to take another step. The gentle laughter of children drifted through the evening air, mingling with the soothing sound of water flowing over smooth stones. White roses bloomed along every path, their delicate fragrance carried by the cool mountain breeze. Everything before him felt impossibly familiar, not because he remembered every detail, but because his heart recognized what his mind could not yet fully explain. Jungkook quietly joined him. So this is Rose Valley. Elena smiled. It has always been here. Jungkook looked around in amazement. Then why did the world forget it? The world didn't forget. Elena gently rested her hand on one of the blooming roses. It simply stopped looking with kindness. The villagers gradually gathered in the central square. They were ordinary people, teachers, gardeners, bakers, musicians, children chasing one another through the flowers. None of them looked surprised to see Jimin wearing the crimson ring. Instead, they welcomed him with warm smiles, as though they had been expecting him all along. An elderly carpenter stepped forward, carrying a beautifully carved wooden box. My father asked me to keep this safe. He handed it to Jimin. Now it belongs to its rightful keeper. Inside rested dozens of letters, each tied with white ribbons. The oldest paper had yellowed with age. The newest looked only a few years old. Jimin unfolded the first letter. It had been written by Adrian. If you are reading this, then hope has survived longer than fear. That means we succeeded. Jimin smiled softly before opening another. It was written decades later by a woman who had never met Adrian. I became a teacher because someone protected my family when they had nothing. I never learned the guardian's name, but I promised to pass that kindness forward. Another letter followed. A doctor had written it. Then a musician. A firefighter. A farmer. A young girl. Generation after generation, people who had never met one another had written about a single moment when someone chose compassion instead of selfishness. None of them mentioned magic. None of them spoke of power. Every story ended with the same sentence. The promise lives because someone chose kindness. Tears quietly rolled down Jimin's cheeks. The ring had never been the true inheritance. Neither had the sanctuary, nor the ancient prophecies. The real legacy was invisible. It lived inside ordinary people who quietly helped others without asking for recognition. Jungkook gently placed a hand on Jimin's shoulder. "What are you thinking?" Jimin closed the final letter. "I'm thinking." He smiled through his tears. Sadrian was wrong about one thing. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. What was that? He believed he failed to keep his promise. Jimin looked around the valley, where children laughed among blooming roses. He never failed. He simply couldn't live long enough to see what his kindness became. Elena's eyes glistened. He would have liked hearing that. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, the villagers gathered beneath the enormous oak tree standing at the heart of Rose Valley. Its branches stretched across the evening sky like welcoming arms. Elena stepped toward Jimin one final time. The ring has one last choice to make. Jimin looked down at the crimson gemstone. It chooses. It always has. The ring slowly grew warm. For a brief moment, its crimson light surrounded everyone beneath the oak tree. Jimin closed his eyes. Instead of visions, he felt peace. Instead of whispers, he heard laughter. Instead of memories, he felt gratitude. When he opened his eyes again, the crimson gemstone had changed. Its brilliant red color slowly faded into a clear crystal that reflected the evening sky. The warmth disappeared. The visions were gone. The ring had become an ordinary heirloom. The priest, who had quietly accompanied them into the valley, smiled knowingly. It has finished its work. Jungkook looked at Jimin. What happens now? Jimin gently removed the ring from his finger. He held it in both hands for a long moment, before placing it inside the wooden box containing the letters. No family should own it. He closed the lid. No one should. Elena nodded proudly. The promise no longer needs a guardian. It belongs to everyone. The box was placed beneath the great oak tree, where its roots would protect it for generations to come, not as a treasure hidden from the world, but as a reminder that the greatest legacies are carried in human hearts rather than precious objects. Years later, travelers passing through the eastern mountains occasionally discovered a peaceful valley filled with white roses. They always spoke of the remarkable kindness of the people who lived there. No one ever mentioned an ancient ring or forgotten prophecies. They simply remembered being welcomed like family. Jungkook and Jimin returned to the Jun estate only long enough to transform it into a museum dedicated to the lives of the forgotten guardians and the countless ordinary people whose quiet acts of compassion had shaped history. The hidden sanctuary remained open to all visitors, not to inspire awe, but to remind every guest that courage is often gentle, and that true strength is found in choosing kindness when no one is watching. Every spring, a single white rose continued to bloom beneath the old oak tree overlooking the valley. Children would often ask why only one flower appeared. The elders always answered with the same gentle smile. Because one promise, faithfully kept, is enough to make the whole world bloom. And so the story of the family ring did not end with magic, wealth, or destiny. It ended with something far more enduring. Two friends who chose compassion over possession, a family that learned humility instead of pride, and a promise that no longer belonged to a single guardian, but to every heart willing to make another person's tomorrow brighter than today. The crimson ring became only a story. The promise became a way of life. And that was the greatest secret it had ever carried.